So hello everyone, good morning. It's great to be here in San Francisco, having all of you here. Of course, our topic today is a very hard one for us to talk about because every time we think about life and death, it's always hard, something that is normally something that we try to avoid to talk about. But it's important. It's important for us to understand how precious life is, to understand what we are doing on this earth, what are our purposes here, and how can we take the best out of it and benefiting from the opportunities that we have in life. And this has everything to do with talking about us being able to cope with the difficulties, the pressures that we have in life. Just this week, 2 days ago, a friend of mine wrote to me asking for prayers because her nephew of 13 years old had jumped from the window. So when we are talking about life and death and thinking about shortening your lives, this is something that we have to talk also to our children, because many children are actually, unfortunately today, resorting to that due to the pressures of life. That's why we really advise that parents be mindful in relation to not preventing their children to hear about it and to discuss about the possibilities of life. We will be talking more about it during our presentation. But let us start first thinking, if we believe in life after death. Is there anyone here that does not believe in life after death? No, in the Spiritist Center, it couldn't be different. But there is a difference between believing and acting as you believe. And I guess in the majority of cases, we don't act as we believe there is life after death. Very often, quite often, we will hear people say, oh, I have to take advantage of the situation. I have to do all of this before I die, as if we were not going to be having another opportunity. Studies tell us that 90% of the population, the world population, they do believe in life after death, immortality of the soul. What is different? Different is what we are going to find after death. For some, you may find the seven virgins. For others, you may find heaven or hell. For others, like ourselves, the spiritists, you will find whatever you had built to find according to your merits, and so on according to the different beliefs. But this is an important point because we see that is much more in the back of our minds, the idea of mortality of the soul, that sometimes we realize. And this is one point that is very important when we are talking about shortening our lives through suicide. So if we do believe that there is life after death, what is the point? Right? Those are the questions we have to ask. Many people may think, from where Kardec received this information about life after death? Of course, we know that it was from the spirits. Kardec was not a medium himself, but he was participating in several mediumship meetings where he would be receiving this kind of information, and it's called universal control of the Spiritist principles. Let me explain to you what is this universal control. They are spread from pole to pole. They are brought through many different mediums. It does not depend on only one person. There is no nationality. It does not stem from any known religion. And they are transmitted gradually by the enlightened spirits. So when we think about Spiritism as opposed to many of the other religions, that the central figure is a person, here in Spiritism, although we mention Kardec all the time, of course, he is not the one that brought the teachings to us, but the spirits that were replying to questions that he proposed that came from many, many different places. Let's see here, 37 countries, Europe 18, America 8, Africa 5, Asia 6, and 268 cities sending communication to Kardec so that he could put together the codification. Not, of course, the Spirit's book. The first one was a more reduced number, but on the other works that he was doing, we are talking about this amount of people, countries, cities involved, all saying the same thing. This is what we call the universal control of the Spiritist principles. So, according to the information that was coming, so through a methodology, we have to remember that Kardec was a scholar, and then he would follow a methodology. We had received this information that yes, there is life after death. And what we understand that this life after death is going to mean according to each one of us. So the main aim of Spiritism is to help humankind improve their moral and intellectual progression. So this is the reason why we study Spiritism. Because we want to understand, to improve our morals, to improve us as an immortal spirit. That is the path that we go through. So suicide, in this case, as we see in the Spirit's book, people have the right to take their own life? No, only God has that right. Because we have to understand that before our incarnation, we have decided what we want to do with our lives. You know, it's very much when you are here on earth and you decide to follow a career. And then you decide to become an aviation engineer. Okay, always seems wonderful, interesting, talking about planes and maybe even NASA that you have just here around the corner, all of that. But as soon as you get to college and as soon as you get to your work, you will see that yes, there are many interesting, incredible, amazing things about being an aviation engineer, but there are also very difficult struggles that you have to go through, hurdles that you have to overcome, because everything in life is the same. We can talk about the simple thing, like for instance, baking a cake. I was talking to some friends here this week that I am incapable, I don't know why, to bake a cake. It seems such an easy thing, but my cakes are never going to grow, or they grow just half of it. I don't know what happens. You know, it's a simple thing. So in the simple tasks of life, some may be more successful than others. Some may find more burdens than others. So in everything, when we are thinking about programming our return to the physical earth, so to say, we will have the opportunity of choosing, but we always have to keep in mind that our choices will have both sides. Sides that will bring us a lot of happiness and sides that maybe will lead us to or present us many challenges and difficulties. But everything with the aim of growing. So when we have this understanding that I'm here to grow, I'm here to progress, I'm here to become the best that I can, and I'm here to, yeah, and I'm here to develop myself. And it's part of development to have both sides of life, both sides of things, right? The good and the bad. Then, when we are going through the difficulties of life, we will find somehow more courage. And the good thing about that is that for us, as Spiritists, we have such a huge help and level of understanding through the teachings of the spirits, that even when we are going through the most difficult periods of our lives, we are capable of knowing of resorting to people that can help us, to books, to the philosophy that we have and we receive when learning and studying Spiritism. So, therefore, suicide in this case is going to be an act of extreme rebelliousness to the will of God. We have received the gift of life. We cannot dispose of our lives as we please. So some facts on suicide. Um, Numbers are a bit old, but still, unfortunately, they are just growing. 10th leading cause of death in the U.S., 8th leading cause for males and 9 for females. Males are more efficient in choosing their way of dying, and that's why the number of males that die through suicide is bigger than women. They choose more effective and irreversible means, while women will choose means that give them time to be assisted and not dying of suicide. So, one important thing here is that each suicide affects at least 6 other people. It gives you a trauma. It impacts your life a lot. But one thing that is interesting about that is that when we think that anything bad that we do will impact at least the life of 6 people, anything good that we do also will impact the lives of at least 6 people. So there is always a multiplying effect according to our actions. And that's why we always talk so much about changing our ways of inner transformation, improvement in Spiritism. Because not only you are going to be gaining from that, but you are going to make an impact in the world without even realizing that the example that you are going to be putting out in the world. The highest rates of suicide are found about divorced people, separated, widowed, lowest among the married one. It's interesting because it's so common for us to hear couples complaining about one or the other. Oh, my wife makes my life miserable. Oh, my husband makes my life miserable. And they are that miserable, but not as miserable as the one that do not have a husband or a wife or a partner. And that actually we find a higher rate of suicide. André Trigueiro.
So in Palo Alto, here close to us, Silicon Valley, is the highest incidence of suicide between teenagers in the whole because the pressure of.
We're going to be talking about this part of the teenagers, yeah. So André Trigueiro, that is a journalist, very well-known journalist in Brazil, he has recently dedicated himself to this fight against suicide, and he wrote this book that we are in the process of translating. To live life is the best choice, viver é a melhor opção. And he brings us also some of the facts about suicide. 805,000 a year, 2,200 per day, one each 40 seconds. Suicide attempt, we have, for each suicide that is successful, we have about 20, 25 suicide attempts every 3 seconds. So more people die of suicide than homicides and war casualties. It's horrible when you think about it. That we ourselves are giving up on life so easily. 1.3 million of teenagers die in the world each year. And many of these causes could be preventable. Of course, the first one will be accidents, because they start driving and you can see that they may not be so expert and careful. And the second one is suicide. So for teenagers, the second cause of death is suicide. Why sometimes for teenagers they are more prone to suicide? Because in a way it can seem romantic, poetic. Oh, I'm going to die because of this love that I'll never find anymore in my life. They can wish to be dead because they feel helpless, hopeless. They do not have enough maturity to deal with the difficulties of life. They start experimenting alcohol and drugs. And of course, if they have access to guns, and it's much more risky in this case. They have feelings of stress, confusion, self doubt, pressure to succeed, financial uncertainty. They do not know if they are growing normally, if they're being loved or accepted. The changing in their bodies, they do not know if that is normal or not. So a teenager has a lot on their minds. And of course, like you were mentioning just now, depending on the area that you live, you will feel this pressure each time more. It's not without any reason that, for instance, NYU in New York City, there was one place there that the students would go to commit suicide. That was the library. They had to put a wall of windows in the library in order to prevent at least that they would do that inside their campus. So it's a lot to deal with. And one of the things that I think um, can make a difference, like we were saying, is talk about suicide, which is something that we try not to talk. We do not talk about death because it seems that if we talk about death, death will come for us, or it's something that we want to ignore. And of course, talking about a way of dying that can be more traumatic, it's something that we will try to avoid talking as well. But it's something that is happening all over the world for the most different reasons. You may be rich, poor, you may have everything at your disposal, you may have everything, but it's still people are feeling extremely unhappy, and this is to the increased number of depression that we are having. The majority of people that commit suicide nowadays that could be preventable if they had access to treatment and understand more about depression. So 90% of cases of suicide pathologies, of mental disorders that could be easily diagnosed and treated. There are illnesses that we do not pay that much attention, or that we do not consider illnesses, or that we try to avoid. And depression is one of them. From each 10 cases, 9 can be prevented because we can diagnose and treat. There is a book written by this author, Andrew Solomon, The Noonday Demon, that I really do recommend people to read. It's incredible. He describes his fight against depression and, as a consequence, of course, his desire to end his life. And he brings some very shocking facts. One of them is that he says here, depression is a family secret that everyone has. But no one is going to look for help or try to understand. We try to ignore. One thing that we tend to do is to think that chronic depression is the same thing as you being sad. We may be sad because of certain circumstances that we go through life, which does not mean that we have chronic depression. But many people have chronic depression, and we tend to overlook that. We need to start then differentiate depression versus state of depression, sadness, existential conflicts. Of course, when we go through difficulty in life, you lose your job, you go through a divorce, you have a breakup, or you have an illness problem, we are going to feel sad. We will go through this period of conflicting existential problems. But this does not mean that you have the symptomatology of being the person that suffers from depression. And this is when we keep on saying, oh no, just go out with your friends and everything is going to be peachy. It's not. It's not a matter of going out. It's not a matter of, having a vacation. Depression is something much more serious. And the thing is, the increased number of mental illnesses is actually the one responsible for all those cases. When we talk about, for instance, the sudden death of, the suicide of Robin Williams, it's very shocking. It's the same person that once said that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. He said that, and all of a sudden he can't continue living. And then we find out that not only he was going through a process of illnesses, but he had mental disorders that couldn't make it possible for him to overcome and to have the desire, the will to live. So in this case, we analyze how serious the issue is. It happens more among middle class and poor, not because we have money and vacation and that, but because rich, poor people, they have the possibility of having access to treatment. And not all the governments offered, assistance through the health care for you to go to a therapist, for you to have ongoing treatment to prevent this kind of situation, this illness that is depression. The family is going to stigmatize the depressive. It's always like, they try to make believe that it doesn't exist. And that's the reason why the First Lady Michelle Obama, at her times, she released a program to treat newly mothers who suffer from postpartum depression that can also lead to suicide. So by understanding each time more how depression can be the main cause of suicide, the best thing we have to do is actually to go through the root of it. And the root is the depression. Okay? Anyone has any question? Yes.
Do you think obsession has a big part to play in suicide and depression and things?
Absolutely. In different ways. Because, depression, all the, let's say, emotional imbalances that we may have will attract negative spirits or spirits that have similar thoughts to ours. And of course, when I have more spirits thinking, yeah, life is bad, there is no solution, the best thing is to die, and this and that, it increases your desire to help, to want to do that. And also, we know that there are cases of obsession that the spirits really want the person to die because then they can control them better in the spirit world. What can reduce risk factors? Family. So, it's very important for us to start valuing family life. Most of the time we just complain. Do you remember we just mentioned the statistics that people that live alone, they are more prone to commit suicide than people that have a family household. So like we say, we complain about the spouse, we complain about the children, we complain about the partners, but in a way, we find a support when we have family. So in this case, is the idea of inviting us to understand the importance of family and to be there for each other. So the first aid in terms of, any kind of needs someone in a family may find is actually going to be in the family, or it should be in the family. So when we see signs of depression, we should not discard that and say, no, it's just, that so if it's a woman, that period of the month where you're going to be more impacted by your monthly cycle. It's not. It's not something that it's, for us today to ignore. And that's why family is the first thing that can actually help in the sense of prevention. Because here we are talking about prevention. And the family, of course, is going to be the first one more impacted. Like I told you about this young man of 13 years old, only think about their parents. How can they live with themselves and feeling guilt, feeling that, they were completely powerless if it's their fault because they couldn't see what was going on with their teenager son. A belief in something or a force greater than ourselves. Also, what helps us in terms of prevention is to have a belief, to have a religion, a philosophy, to have this understanding of life after death. All of that can give us more control over ourselves. So also statistics shows that people that go to regularly, they attend the church, their temples, their spiritist centers, they are less prone to commit suicide and at the same time more prone to recover from illnesses or addictions. You can be mad at God and even ask, why me? But you can also ask for support and strength. So when we have a belief, even though in certain times we are always going to be questioning why those things are happening to us, if there is really a God, why things like that happen in the world, at the same time we have something, we have someone, we have a force that we believe and that we can always resort to prayer and support and for support and strength. And how many times a day do you think about yourself? Here is not a matter of being self-centered or selfish. But many times, we just go about life like an automaton, like a machine, and we don't think about ourselves that much. Nowadays we are more worried actually about other people's lives, what are they doing in Facebook and all the other social media that we have, than actually looking at ourselves, at how we are feeling, how certain things that are happening to us are impacting our lives. Like for instance, even when we come here to a Spiritist Center, it can be, you may have different reactions and outcome for, being present in a presentation like this one. You can leave here, okay, yeah, she was nice, it was interesting things that she brought here today. Yeah, the topic is kind of a heavy one. But we can also think how actually the words, the reflections that were brought here impact my life. How often am I feeling sad or sometimes feeling that I have been losing control of myself? Am I thinking about dying? Have already contemplated the idea of ending my life? And so the idea here in terms of thinking about yourselves is how much things that are happening in your lives are impacting you. And sometimes we don't pay attention to that. Okay, I received a lot of information. Like yesterday we had this workshop, 4 hours workshop about passes. It's a lot of information, right? Okay, but how all of that is going to impact me? What did I learn and how what I learned I can put in practice in my day-to-day lives? Okay, there was a lot of talk about the energy and the synergy that we can have with spirits, with forces according to our way of thinking, and how this is going to impact my emotional self and my physical self. But if we do not stop, how can we actually internalize anything? And even if it's not for ourselves, like we said, in the family life, or very close friends. We may have family and close friends that are in need of more guidance, of more presence. And if we are learning things and we can provide that to them, this is something that we should be doing. Have you left today? I'll try to see if I can find of a joke to make you laugh, but I don't know. This topic is never one that I like to joke that much. But this is something that we have to pay attention to. What makes me happy? How do I react when, looking at the beautiful things of life that not necessarily is what I consider to be beautiful, but what is always there for me, the sunrise bringing light to my life. So all of those things that are very, very important for us to pay attention. The greatest causes of suicide, of course, are going to be the causes related to incredulity and to materialism, doubts about the spiritual cause, which will provoke moral weakness before deceptions and sufferings. If I do not believe in anything, right, what's the point? That's what the majority of people will think. I'm in a certain time of life, I'm diagnosed with a serious illness that will kill me with suffering in 10 years' time. Why wait? I live it enough, it's good enough, and I'm going to take control of my life. This is what people normally think. And that's why they favor euthanasia so much, because they do not understand how precious life is. How difficult it is for us to have the opportunity of returning to the physical realm. We that are incarnates now, supposing that we are going to be dying the next 10 or 20 years, God forbid, right? It will take another 40, 50, 60 years for us to come back. We are talking in an average 100 years. So it's hard to come back to have the opportunity of having a life, a physical life again. So what should we do upon contemplating this idea? There is one book, it's called Action and Reaction by the Spirit André Luiz to Chico Xavier, that they talk about a very interesting case where there was this man and his son that have abused it from a woman, and now that they have returned and they have been for a long time working to better themselves in the spiritual world, they realized the importance of making amends, of returning to earth together with this woman to give the chances that they took from her. It took them over 50 years just to find the woman. Because we think that, once we go to the spirit realm, everyone is in the neighborhood, right? It's not. 50 years just for them to find her, to have access to the information where she was. Now it's going to take another 20 to 30 years for them to prepare the return to the incarnation, where they finally are going to meet and become husband and wife, So we are talking over 100 years. 30 years until return, 20, 25 years of age if you think that you're going to get married that early is over 100 years.
The way we count time here, right?
Yeah, but when we are talking about low-level spirits, it's basically the same. Yeah. We are very close to the Earth's crust, and so we are more impacted by the time of the Earth than actually the time of the more highly evolved places. It's actually astrophysicists, they also say the same thing, right? I mean, the closer you are to the planet, to the same the clock goes. The farther away you go from Earth, the clock goes faster. And it's the same principle that we have in Spiritism in a way, because the farther away you go in terms of the higher level of worlds, time is different. It's different. So that's why, everything that we can do in order to prevent people from being excessively attached to material life, and to tell them and to lead them to realize that there is more than only this life, the better we are going to be able to eliminate these causes of suicide. And Joana de Angelis says, the cause of all evils that are present in the world today is due to the absence of a more spiritual vision of life. When we don't have this spiritual vision of life, and now you see the importance of the spiritist education for children and youth, because we have staggering numbers of children and youth committing suicide. So some parents, because they just accommodate, because they don't want to use their Sundays, their Saturdays or their Sundays, they say, oh no, when they are adults, they are going to look for this kind of, assistance. If they wish the same way that it happened to me, perhaps, if that was the case. Maybe they will not have this choice because they will win their lives before. And Andrea Lewis, Chico Xavier, and Emmanuel says it is responsible for almost the total number of suicide, lack of faith. Because when we don't see any other alternative, because there are no other alternatives in our minds, this is when I decide that it's time to end my life. Here in San Francisco, there is this documentary that was done in 2004 by this Eric Steele, that he talks about the bridge, the Golden Gate. It depicts the story of 6 people among the 24 known to have committed suicide, plus a number of attempted suicides from the Golden Gate Bridge. And when he was doing this documentary and talking to one of the people that have jumped it, I don't know if you know, but there are people that travel, even from other parts of the world, to commit suicide in the Golden Gate Bridge. It has this mystical appeal that if you want to die and end your life, that would be the place to do it. It's a very sad thing to think about it. So the testimony of this man that has jumped is the following. In the middle of the way, I regretted my action and tried to find a way of surviving. I turned myself and reached the water with my feet. A seal saved my life, helping me to float while the rescue team arrived. So when you jump with your head, and it's like hard cement when you reach the water, you have no way of surviving. But if you reach with your feet, probably you're going to break the great part of your bones from the leg and something else. But there is a chance. This is what happened with this man. Although he broke all his legs, not being able to swim, the seal came and took him to help him to float. So it's a beautiful story in a way. But why we are presenting this story? Because even when we have communications from spirits, and if they are going to talk about suicide, they will talk about their regret. And here is a man that immediately regretted, but then he jumped to the Golden Gate Bridge. What can you expect? In a moment of craziness, you just go and jump, and then it's too late. Also, the Golden Gate Bridge has changed its architectural structure to help preventing suicide. They have teams of suicide prevention there. And this man, Mr. Briggs, Kevin Briggs, he's one of the person that works on the bridge. And he tried to save many. So when they see people that is about to jump, they come there. And he talks about this case. This is a TED Talk. It's very interesting if you hear look for Kevin Briggs TED Talk, Suicide, Golden Gate Bridge. He said why he did not kill himself, what made him change his mind is because you listened. So it's another thing for us to think about. Are we listening, even ourselves? Sometimes I think that, when we were thinking, have you thought about yourself today? Have you left today? We are so much trying to numb ourselves because we are afraid what we are going to find. And then we keep ourselves busy with whatever is happening outside. And people are not interested in listening to you. Have you realized that sometimes we go out with friends, and if you could tape the conversation, you would see that the 2, 3, 4 friends only talked about themselves. So if I say, oh, I'm feeling sad today. You know what? I'm feeling sad too. Do you think it's because of the weather? I was thinking, and the other will say, yeah, I've been feeling sad since yesterday, or thank God I'm not feeling sad. But no one stops to say, why do you think you're feeling sad? Is there anything that I can do perhaps to help you not feeling sad? Oh, I have an aunt that had a heart attack. Oh, I have a friend that had a heart attack last week as well, and the family is devastated. Have you paid attention to your conversations? How much we do not listen, and we have this need of jumping and talking about ourselves. It's hard, right? So, the advice of people that have much more knowledge and experience and expertise about suicide is that let's talk about suicide. So why some people think it's not good to talk about suicide? There are people that recommend not to talk about suicide to prevent people from having the idea of killing themselves. The reason for that was a book from Goethe, The Sorrow of Young Werther, where the idea of suicide was linked to something beautiful and romantic, very much like Romeo and Juliet, that led to the suicide of many people using the same method of Werther. So when we have famous people committing suicide, like Marilyn Monroe, for instance, or even Robin Williams, the number of suicides increase. And then led people to think that it's better to avoid talking about it. But like I said, those that have been the World Health Organization that have been doing researches and in order to do suicide prevention, they say, yes, talk about suicide and never create a myth or fantasize. You put it, never aggrandize the moral qualities. Oh, it's someone that was very brave, very courageous to end their lives. But actually to show the gruesome facts of suicide. So many times, because we are afraid to talk about suicide to our children, this is the reason why they are committing suicide, because in our mind we think, oh, maybe I will give them the idea of doing so. No, in the same way that we go to them and have all this conversation about unsafe sex, about the use of drugs, it's the same thing we should be talking to our children about suicide. So they know. The recent to that, and you still can watch on Netflix, is the 13 Reasons Why. I still haven't the courage of watching it, but my son did. He just turned 22, and hearing him comment about this series, 13 Reasons Why, made me feel like looking at. At the end, I said, well, what did you think? What was your impression? And he said, there was so much selfishness in, in the girl that commit suicide and try to blame it on others. And I mean, the way that he was saying, and here we are trying, oh my God, let's put a parent control in this area here because we don't want our children to watch it. And he was completely horrified with the outcome for the living and the selfishness of the person in committing the act. So, and those are the comments we hear that people are saying in terms of when they watch this miniseries. Did you watch that?
I did.
It was your impression too, Fred?
Pretty much, yes. She was blaming everybody else, but yeah. She was victimizing herself quite a bit.
Because it is so easy for us to blame everybody else, and I mean, we think it's an easy way out, but it's not. Okay, so we also have, always to consider in terms when we are talking about spiritism of what we call unconscious suicide, which means how well we are taking care of ourselves when we are giving ourselves to addictions, anything that can actually reduce our quality of life and the lifespan that we were supposed to have and are not going to have because of certain actions that we impose to ourselves. In near-death experience, NEDA and suicide, actually 8 million people in the US had this kind of experience. And when we have when you go and talk to people that had a near-death experience through suicide, they don't say, I saw the light, there was a tunnel. They always talk about experiences that are much more disturbing, closer to a horror movie than this I saw the light, or a parent, or someone, a relative appeared. And we have Dr. Raymond Moody Jr., that is one of the specialists in this country, that researches a lot about near-death experiences and talk to us about it. It's extreme sports and suicide. Do you think that those people that do extreme sports are trying to commit suicide? Yes or no?
Yes.
Well, we consider suicide, when you have the desire of dying. So in this case, we could not say that is a conscious way of ending their life. But unconsciously speaking, on an unconscious level, or as a result of your being careless with your life, you are actually wasting your life. Every time you put your life to risk, you are at least going to be considered an unconscious suicide, because there was not the desire to end your life, but you know the risks, and you know that it can be the outcome can be that you die. So it's interesting because this Dr. Gracefo says humans are the only creatures foolish enough to deliberately take risks and expose themselves to mortal danger. Animals don't do that. So we are the ones that are stupid enough to go and engage in things that can put our lives to risk. And we have what is called reason. Animals will just put themselves to risk in a way if they have to provide for food. So, but other than that, they will not be taking foolish risks, and this is something that I think we should be thinking about. The last news that we had from 2014 is that a simple blood test predicts the risk of suicide. So, researchers from Johns Hopkins University have found a chemical alteration in a gene that is linked to stress responsible, and a blood test could predict if the person has this risk. The gene mutation is called SKA2, and they have been analyzing samples from deceased people that were mentally ill, some that had died by suicide, and they saw that the level of this gene was much more increased, and they think that they can predict the suicide risk with 80% accuracy. But can you imagine you willingly going there? Let me see if my blood test I have the gene to commit suicide.
They even got a father. They said that people that don't have that, they have absolutely no desire.
And I mean, maybe not all of us, not all the population is going to be doing that, but if you have serious cases of mental illnesses in your family, and even cases of suicide in the family, because when you have a case of suicide in the family, you exponentially increases your risk to commit suicide. Then we should perhaps think about resorting to this kind of, test, and to see how everything is going and how can we try.
Too much thoughts. They advise to take them.
So it's good that we have, an extra tool that can help us in this sense. But the most important thing that we have to remember when we talk about suicide in spirits is that life never ends. So death is only going to be an illusion, and we should concern more ourselves about getting the best out of life in terms of spiritual acquisitions, in terms of moral virtues that we can develop here, and then when the time comes for us to return to the spirit world, then we will be returning as victoriously, knowing that we have conquered and learned what we were here to learn. So we are always called upon to value life, and always have to remember that thinking about ending our lives through suicide is always going to represent disappointment, because not only will we wake up on the other side of life with the same problems that have led us to, but with the aggravation of knowing the devastation that we left with those that are loved ones to us. So if you don't believe in miracles, perhaps you've forgotten you are one. So the miracle of life is something that should help us, keep us, maintaining this desire to live. And the good thing when we have a community such as the Spiritist community, we don't have to go through stuff alone. That is the reason why we have the Spiritist Center, that we have Spiritist friends, that we have all those books, that we have so many. We know how to resort to prayer. We know how to go and read a good book if silly thoughts start coming to your mind. So we don't have to go through that alone. We have to speak. We have to ask for help. All of us, all the time, we need help. And that's why we are here, because we want to find better ways to cope with life. And I wrote a book about suicide, and when I was writing this book, I received a message that I put it in the book that I think it's a very moving message. The message is called My Son. Once you departed, my tears have never ceased. My heart fell apart, my still eyes lost in the horizon. It was your choice to leave us behind, to depart without a kiss, not giving us a chance to make you change your mind, thus leaving us in a desert without bliss. Oh, my dear one, my life will never be the same. Where did I fail? Why was I not able to support you and to give you strength to withstand the struggles of life? O flesh of my flesh, rebellious spirit, I wish you could have come to me more often, to open up your heart and to find shelter in my love. Now, my son, my thoughts are only for you. My life is your life, my prayer a single cry of help, so that the merciful Creator may give us the chance to trail the same path again. I will look after you forever. I will assist you like never before. But this time, I will not lose you to the dark shadows of despair. God is loving, God is forgiving. My love accompanies you now and forever. So, if at the end of the day we feel that we don't have that much strength to continue, let's think about the loved ones that we have. And let us go to them, talk to them, and at least give them the opportunity to save us and to help us in hours of distress. This is the reason why we are all here, to lean on one another and to learn that we are not alone in this journey. Not only we have our fellow spiritists, but we have the loving spirits that follow us. We have our guardian angels, we have spirits that have been our relatives in this incarnation, in other incarnation. So there is a countless number of spirits. They are cheering for us, they are there waiting to help us if we call for them. So this was the message that we have today. This is something that is very important for us to talk about, to talk to children, like I said, to talk to others. And let us pay more attention to others. Let us learn to listen more, to see if at the end of the day we cannot make, a difference that means life or death in the lives of others. Thank you so much for your attention.